Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this Anarchy analysis match of the week. Here in the LCS, we're covering the entire series of TSM versus Cloud9, and this matchup was an absolute banger from game number 1. It lived up to the hype of the other match of the week that we're yet to cover, which will be coming out soon after this one, but nevertheless, let's get into Champion Select with the DJ spinning the track ever so nicely. So, game number 1's draft, we see C9 on the blue side, TSM on the red side, and we're going to only cover the picks that are seen for the first time once, and then we'll obviously skip over them in the next few games of this series. Anyway, we'll start with the bans here. In game 1 we have a Nidalee, Shen and Caitlyn ban on the side of Cloud9, and on TSM side they have the Tom Kench, the Olaf and the Kalista. Now these are some big target bans from Cloud9 as well as a couple from TSM. We start with Nidalee. It was something that Speaker absolutely crushed the Golden Guardians on in their last best of 5 in playoffs. The Shen's something TSM also prioritised in that series with the Stand United ultimate, allowing them to pressurize the map effectively, as well as provide a lot of pressure and safety for the entire team, and it realistically worked quite well. And another big target ban was the Caitlyn by C9 here, as Doublelift essentially played most of the first few series on this pick. He didn't tend to go towards the Senna or the Ashe, which are the two major picks that are usually left available in these playoffs mostly, and as such I love these bans from Cloud9 for game 1 to kind of test the waters to see what TSM will bring when some of these big picks that they were showing in the previous series worked so well for them. Now TSM side, they have less knowledge of what works against C9 other than the series they lost against FlyQuest, and FlyQuest tended to ban these sorts of picks when they're on red side, as Kalista is the other big ADC in the meta, so she's getting removed. It's something that Sven has tended to go towards if it's available to him, as he's not really known for playing either the Ashe or the Senna that's readily available, and the Olaf ban is a big pick for Blabber in the jungle, as it's something that he's realistically only found form on in the first half of this split. It's the only pick that he got wins on in that, and then in the second half of the split he struggled when he wasn't on a pick like Olaf where he could be so safe and aggressive. As for the TK ban, I like this from TSM because it removes a safety blanket that Vulcan is known for being. He's known for being less of an aggressive support, playing these Broms, these TKs, and maybe the occasional Naut or Thresh. So I like this pick ban coming through from TSM a lot, and realistically it makes this draft look very strong for TSM to start with as we move into the first round of picks. So let us get into this draft, and Set is the first pick here for Cloud9. And this is actually a huge thing because Set on this current meta is considered one of the best junglers at the moment because of the fact that he's ever so powerful in pressurizing the map and affecting lanes so efficiently, while also being able to keep up with taking CS and also being a big bully in the jungle. And I like this pick incredibly for C9, as it does mean that this pick that Speaker has gone towards quite a lot is removed from him and doesn't have the same sort of agency in terms of what's available to him that can do these big, massive engage plays that's readily available to him. Now the response though from TSM is they go with something that's smart, because in the Golden Guardian series they tended to let Bjergsen's pick fall to the second round and essentially have him banned out considerably, and in this series they're not doing that. Senna and TF are the picks here for TSM. I love this, Senna being a very strong ADC in the current meta, obviously she's got probably the best scaling because her scale is technically indefinite with the soul passive where she collects mist stacks and essentially buffs herself up that way. Very powerful in terms of gaining range, gaining power through it, and being an absolute monster into the late game in terms of healing her team up. As for the TF pick, I like that because it means that Bjergsen gets a pick that allows him to roam, and considering Niski is a roaming mid laner who plays for other lanes, essentially Bjergsen putting down challenge to Niski. Hey, I've picked a big, massive roaming champion that can essentially get out of lane past level 6, and I'm going to be matching your plays with ease. You've got to try and outplay the best mid laner in the LCS by far this season in a very difficult matchup for him. And I like this pick for TSM. Bjergsen's TF is very strong. He's played it quite a lot this split, and I think he's got a very strong record on it. It's close to 100% win rate, I believe, and I like it considerably. Now, the next pick I really don't like for Cloud9. It's the Ezreal for Sven. Yes, this is kind of one of his pocket picks that he's played pretty well. It's what he won a lot of games on TSM on, but he kind of resorts to this quite a lot, and it's gotten quite stale. He's not as good as what he used to be, in my opinion, because of the fact that he gets so easily outpaced. Ezreal's a safe pick, but it's not the strongest ADC that's available in the meta. If Sven could play Ashe, he should play it right now in this game, and it would allow the picks and the sort of comp that, I don't know, a set would like to be able to pressurize the bot wave and actually make plays, because now with an Ezreal, it's essentially not a lane that this set can easily gank because of the fact that there's no CC on an Ezreal kit, whereas an Ashe has her volley that she can chase people down with to land her freezing frost shots from her Q, and then the arrow, obviously the big major stun in her kit, essentially is unavailable to this bot lane of C9, and it really irks me out because that just removes a pressure point on the map for C9 to attack, and it's annoying that they can't exactly do that, and it really weakens this C9 squad. Now, the last pick in this phase I do like a bit more, because knowing that their bot lane essentially has no stuns here for TSM, in terms of the bot laner, we don't know the support yet at this point. Essentially, we see the lock-in of the Galio come in for the for C9, which obviously matches TF's roam game, and I like that a lot. It obviously allows the play response to essentially be a play response with the entrance of the Galio ult and providing the shielding against, say, a TF burst. I like this pick. It works well, especially with the taunt. It's essentially the counter taunt that's been found out with the Shen being removed. Big play here, and I like this Galio as a whole. The last pick, though, for TSM is the Graves in this phase. I like it. It's a pick that we don't see Speaker on too much. He's not known for these farm-heavy junglers that carry late game. He's known for these playmakers in early game, like he plays as Sedge, he plays the Lee Sin, those sorts of picks in the previous few series. Even the Nidalee, to an extent, is a playmaker more than an actual farming carry champion. And that is a big pick, in my opinion, if I'm TSM here, as essentially you look at the first three picks they've gone with, a Senna, a TF, and a Graves, all three big carry champions with a lot of range in their kits, and it's going to be quite hard if you're C9 at this rate to actually land any of these ultimates from the Galio or even Set, because TSM has a lot of movement, a lot of peel in terms of positioning and getting around fights, and I like this a lot from these first three picks as a whole from TSM. Now, after that very lengthy talk about the first three picks for each team, let us focus in on the round 2 bans here from each team. Bard Yuumi from TSM and Thresh and Renekton banned from the side of Cloud9. And I'm actually surprised Thresh has made it this far through the actual pecking order. Considering it is the S tier support in current meta, I'm actually amazed it's got through this far. But yeah, looking at these bans, TSM removing the support pool that basically Vulcan's known for being. He's this sort of player who goes for these supportive, defensive supports. Bard, obviously very objective heavy support, so controlling the map is sort of its style. Removing that is big for TSM because it allows this TF to essentially control objectives with the Destiny and having the Greys being able to carry late game without having to worry about a Bard stopping his objective take and it being very impactful. Also, the Yuumi ban comes through from TSM. I like that considering it removes that big powerful bot lane combo of the Ezreal and Yuumi. So much mobility in that kit. It is very, very strong, has a lot of poke, and is very, very good at making the map control very easily for the C9 squad, so removing that is huge. Thresh and Renekton, obviously Renekton would work quite well for the topside map for TSM, because Renekton probably would counter, say, a Kennen if C9 wanted it, or even a pick like this Set if it's put into the top lane. And Set is probably known to be in the jungle, so it would more than likely go there. Still can technically be flexed, and realistically banning out the Renekton means that there's less chance of it being killed off in that top side. And now we enter the last round of picks here for each team. Start with the Rakan pick for TSM. And I like this a lot because Vulcan also is known for his Rakan, and it's a very big pick in terms of being able to lock you up, and with TSM's draft so far, they do lack this strong engaged champion. Like, yes, you've got the TF who can come behind with the Destiny and gold card someone, or land a Senna snare, but they have no real hard engage. And this Rakan provides shielding, it provides an ult that can essentially charm people and bring them close together and lock them up with ease. And I like this pick as a whole for TSM, and although it's not paired with the Senna, it's paired with a Senna instead of a Xayah, it's still a very strong pick. It was buffed recently in terms of its ultimate speed, I do believe got buffed, so he's able to easily lock up the right targets and make big plays as a whole, and as such I'm glad it actually got locked in for TSM. The response though from Cloud9 is the Kindred, so it pushes the Set to the top side, and the Braum, and I'm gonna discuss this right now. I'm not a big fan of the Braum, and the reason being is you've got champs like Nautilus, you've got champs like Leona, champs that can essentially counter the Rakan, still available, and Nautilus in my opinion is an A tier support. Rakan probably is B, considering the fact he's very rarely played in Pro at the moment, and I would say that a Nautilus pick would work so much better than a Braum, and the reason being is the Dredge line, far bigger range than a Braum's Q. You've got probably a better tank stats than a Braum, who can, yes, stop the abilities going through him, but you look at the TSM lineup, you're going to stop what? The TF's wave of bullets. You don't stop the Senna Q, and she just uses that to get some heals down and a bit of burst damage down. You stop the Dawning Shadow, but Senna can technically just put that on the side and not directly on top of you, and essentially get the same effect of the shielding. It's not a good pick in my opinion. Nautilus or even Leona to counter the Rakan would be a far better pick in terms of shutting down TSM's engage and providing a lot more peel for your team. And the last pick on the C9 side, the Kindred, I mean, yeah, you provide a bit of protection to the Galio who'll go in, you can put your Lamb's Respite down and provide life protection for your team, but That's not much, considering the fact that you've got realistically just a Braum to frontline and a set. This Kindred doesn't do too much, and Ezreal's your other carry. I don't like this pick too much either. You've got Hecarim, Lily's still up, I should say. Even Evelyn is still available. These picks are more likely to be useful for you, and even the set would have been far better in the jungle than this Kindred in my opinion. And you could have took, say, an Ornn or a tankier top laner to provide a bit more engage, to provide some actual strength to your lineup that you kind of lack with this team comp that you've drafted so far, because you have realistically no real hard engage. Galio does not count because that requires your teammates to step forward and go in. It's kind of more secondary engage. This entire team lacks hard engage, and I don't like it too much here for C9. Now, the last pick we need to discuss actually makes this TSM draft even more interesting, and it's the Lucian. And Lucian, you would think, okay, I like this pick because it's very powerful. It's been rising back into the meta, 10.16 in playoffs in the LEC, it's smashing mid lane. But in this series, it's going to be played topside for Broken Blade, and it's going into a Set. Now, Set is known for being this hard lane bully who dominates lanes. Lucian counteracts him quite easily because of the fact he's ranged. Ranged champions into melee early is very, very strong, and Lucian being a shorter range champion with a lot of chase down abilities, it makes him very powerful into a Set. And Set will have a hard time dealing with him, and if this Lucian gets going early, he's going to be unstoppable when it comes to late, using his culling to just kill the opposition with ease. Anyway, the only issue with my TSM draft right now is they're ranged, they're quite squishy, in terms of the fact that they've got no real frontline tank, other than the Rakan, who's just there for essentially the engage. He's just there, he'll probably build very supporty, maybe go for a Locket as his second item, but he's not the strongest of tanks and can be bursted out quite easily. As for the C9 side, as stated, I don't like that they've got no real engage, and as a whole will get outpaced by this TSM roster, who as a whole wins this draft phase quite easily with this very unique draft that they've gone with. So, to start off today, I want to focus on TSM's Bifrost and how he pilots this Rakan in this team fight. So, this play starts off with him being unintentionally hit by a Braum Q and Braum ult, as well as the Galio E, which was all intended for Doublelift, who was walking behind him as he was sitting in a brush. This forces TSM to retreat backwards into their jungle, and in which it forces both sides to essentially disengage. Bjergsen re-engages with Destiny onto Kindred, forcing out the Lamb's Respite, and also the Galio ultimate alongside it to dissuade TSM from chasing. Both teams do agree to disengage, but with C9's jungler forced to base due to his low health, and all of the ultimates burnt by C9 in that last play, TSM turned to the Baron Pit. Biofrost sets up a defensive position to engage from, essentially where he was originally caught out. Now, this is where a mistake from Sven costs C9 the play. Sven is leading his front line, standing directly in front of all of his team and the protection, and walks directly next to Biofrost. Because of this, Bio uses his ultimate to charm both C9 bot members, and as well as this, uses his W to lock up Sven, to knock him up and allow his team to knock him down, giving the kill over to the Rakan as well. And interestingly enough here, Bio didn't look to charm up every single member of C9. He instead just took the big carry on the Cloud9 side and the person who was going to protect him and just make them unable to do their jobs. And that allows TSM to re-engage. TSM want to finish off the remaining C9 members, but the Galio lands a 3-man taunt onto Rakan, Lucian, and also the Senna. And interestingly enough here, which makes this play very exciting if you're a support player, Rakan uses a stopwatch here to nullify him as a target for the Galio to burst out. And this is huge because Rakan is the main engage for TSM, so he would essentially go in and lock up a target once his abilities came back up, and he's also the lowest health member at this point of the team fight, so going into a status means that he cannot be killed off here and keeps himself alive. And Lucian survives the damage coming out from the Galio because he had a lot more health and kills him off, while Bjergsen goes chasing for the Kindred to kill him off and actually succeeds in doing so, allowing a free Baron over to TSM as well as the game. Very nicely done here by Biofrost, and it's something you don't normally see in teamfights, is praise towards how a support plays it and using his tools to the best of his ability. Anyway, that's game number 1 wrapped up. Let's move over to our second game, where we should be seeing a bit of a change up from game 1. Welcome to game number 2, and I'm going to be quite short and frank here on the first round of picks and bans, and essentially say that the Kalista, Olaf, Caitlyn, Set and Nidalee all stay the same in terms of bans, and the Tom Kench that TSM banned 3rd pick in this round has actually been switched out for a TF. They're not allowing C9 to make the roam plays TSM went with in game number 1. And as a whole, I like the switch up, though it does provide Vulcan a more safe option in terms of supports that he's more likely to go towards alongside an Ezreal or a champion that can provide a lot more damage than Yaz. But hey ho, who knows? But yeah, TF's the only ban change up here in this first phase. And let's move over to what we see in the first round of picks. Now, TSM change up their draft considerably as they're on blue side, and they first picked the Shen here. Obviously, it was banned in game 1. The global ult from Stand United as well as a TP combination allows this champion to be very impactful on the map without having to essentially leave his lane. And it's a very powerful pick that TSM have used quite effectively in the past, with Broken Blade piloting it with a lot of success. Now, response is Cloud9 locking in their ADC in the Senna. They are going with this pick overall. It's not one of the first times I've seen Sven on this pick, but it's the first time in this series that he hasn't gone to an Ezreal, and Ezreal was what he went with in C9's losing series to FlyQuest, and as a whole, it did not work out for him there. But the Senna, we haven't seen it too much in playoffs from him, and it may look slightly weaker than what he normally goes with, but either way, it's going to be interesting considering the fact it's going to be paired alongside the Lilia here, and it is the first Lilia of this series. So we can discuss how it works. Essentially, a very strong jungle champion could technically be played topside, but it gets most of its power from the jungle because of the fact it's very good at chasing down targets and roaming very aggressively and scaling up, and allows the sort of playstyle that Blabber wants to go for, as Blabber's more of this scale up to late game support and be impactful in team fights then. That's why he likes this Olaf or the Graves that he goes towards, because it can essentially scale up and play quite nicely. Now, the last pickups for TSM in this phase is the Ashe to counteract the Senna. It's kind of this counter pick that people tend to go towards, and it works very nicely with a Shen because you can land the arrow and have Shen come in on the Stand United and lock up targets that way, and essentially play the map a bit more aggressively in terms of locking up picks, using your Hawkshot to scout out and play with a big amount of aggression. And I like this TSM duo from the top and the bot lane, and what's more importantly, the mid lane pick of the Azir is secured for Bjergsen. Azir is one of his more go towards champions if he's feeling it here, as it provides a lot more scaling than some of his other picks that you can play, like say the Zoe or the Syndra. But Azir, a high amount of scale, has a lot of attack speed and burst potential with the AP stats, and usually this leads me to believe that TSM will go for a AD early game jungler rather than the AP jungler like an Evelynn that's still available. And we need to discuss this last pick of this phase. It's the Tahm Kench. I like this pick more in this game than the Braum because of the fact there's a lot of pick potential on TSM side. The fact that the taunt from Shen can come through, the fact that Azir can sweep people up, and the Ashe arrow can come through. This Tahm Kench makes a lot more sense than the Braum does, and realistically it's very safe in protecting the carries and allowing this C9 squad to essentially re-engage with safety and not having the risk of kind of overreaching in certain aspects. Our second ban phase, we have only one returning ban, which is the Bard. It's kind of a mean ban against TSM in certain aspects after their Golden Guardian's performance with the pick, where Biofrost gave over Soul with his bad-tempered fates. But it's still a strong pick for TSM, so it being banned is a smart option here, considering the fact that TSM would probably look to have a champion like, say, a Bard or maybe even a Nor or Thresh in this bot half of the map to kind of lock up targets alongside the Ashe arrow. So I like that ban coming through. Hecker's the other ban for C9 that removes this sort of effectiveness that TSM want in the jungle, where they want to have an early strong AD pick. So why not just ban out a Hecker? They could have gone with the Graves in terms of having a big carry in the jungle here for TSM. They could have removed that, considering the fact he just played it in the last game to a win. But instead they go with the Hecker, who does have a lot more power and agency in bursting out targets in early game instead of scaling up and being a threat later on. Now, TSM side things, they ban out the Jace and the Zoe, and I like these bans as a whole because it means that TSM essentially can remove these strong picks in the top lane, and that kind of, I'm actually surprised it's a Jace over, say, a Gangplank ban, because of the fact that Gangplank works extremely well into a Shen, so does, say, a Renekton, or something along those lines that plays nicely against this champion. I would have expected to have been banned instead of the Jace, but obviously TSM know that Licorice can go towards this Jace as a pick and can carry quite heavily on the pick. As for the Zoe, it is a Niski sort of pick. He played this to extreme success in Spring Split and parts of Summer. He's got a very strong record on this pick. I like it being removed because it means that it forces him onto something that doesn't have the sort of agency to deal with an Azir, because Azir essentially allows a lot of pressure in a lane, and with, say, an Akali, if they go towards this here C9, it kind of has a hard time getting in onto the Azir because he can just use his Emperor's Divide, putting up the Sand Soldiers, and I like having these bans coming out from TSM to nullify some stronger picks overall. Welcome to the last round of picks. We start with the Akali lock-in for C9. I would have been a fan of this if it weren't for the fact that Azir works extremely well into this pick, but it does allow a lot of execution and backline access with her abilities, and she can essentially tear up a team fight if she's essentially not killed off in time, which TSM will probably be looking to do with the Shen to taunt her up and keep her at bay, as well as having the Emperor's Divide, as we discussed a few seconds ago, to just sweep her up. Now, the response from TSM is the Rakan Lee Sin pickups. Rakan returning to this lineup, and yeah, I like it because it worked extremely well in game 1. Rakan, well, Biofrost popped off on the pick and it does do work. I would have preferred maybe a Nautilus so that they can essentially use the depth charge to guarantee knock up the Akali to stop her from getting in to your team, as well as having, say, a dredge line as well to keep her in track and vision, and that would have been a better pick in my opinion. But Rakan still works to the same extent, but I would rather prefer Nautilus. And the last pickup for TSM Lee Sin, early game AD pick. It works well. It's smart because you have the Azir in the mid lane, AP scaling. You have Ashe who's AD scaling. You need a bit of early game damage and gank pressure with this Lee Sin who can just hop over the walls in mid wave, kick back this Akali to essentially stop her from getting away and lock her up that way. I like this pick considerably, though you do have a bit of a struggle against Delilah when it comes to late game. And what's more importantly, the last pick for this Cloud9 lineup is the Graves, and they make Delilah, or Lilia, whatever she's called, go up to the top lane. It's a bit of a lane bully into this Shen, and it's gonna be hard for her, honestly, if she gets locked up by the Shen, but she can play around him by using her movement speed passive to essentially make this lane very, very threatening for him. But the Graves in the jungle, scaling AD damage, something they realistically lack, obviously with the Akali and the Lilia in the top and mid lane. You then have a Senna who is scaling AD. You need a jungler with a bit of AD to combat the AP champions that you've got in your two solo lanes. But that's the two drafts coming through. TSM obviously have this cross map global plays that they can go for, and C9 have this sort of burst you out team fighting comp for late game. As a whole, I think they're fairly even in terms of drafts, and it comes down to execution, but as I say, it could go either way here as we load up onto the Rift for our Game 2 play analysis. Game 2, we are heading into another Drake fight, and this fight we're looking at the effectiveness of backline access for an Akali. C9 start this Drake up with TSM approaching, and now Akali starts to channel her TP to get behind TSM, who are on top of the Drake at this point and are able to secure it for themselves. But they lose Lee Sin, who is smoke screened and unable to smite the Drake. While this was happening, Azir was poking down the center, forcing TK to devour her and chuck her to safety. But Shen flash taunts before this actually spit out happens, and he gains very little from this. Akalia finally arrives as Lilia flashes forward and hits a 3-person queue, putting them to sleep and sentencing them to death. This then leaves Shen on his own, who is being bullied by Tahm Kench, who tongue lashes him into a stun, forcing him to die. And then from there we see the Cloud9 team take this Azir turret, run down the mid lane, and a look to end this game, taking game number 2 from TSM's clutches and winning their first match of this series, taking the series to 1-1. It's time for game 3 with C9 on blue, TSM on red, and we start with the Nidalee, the Shen and the Kate ban, the Kalista, the Olaf and the TK ban returning into things. All bans stay relatively the same from game 1, so no real changes there. As for the first round of picks, we'll look at them and see how they've adapted. So C9 going with the first pick. Said it's the first time it's actually been left open for these two teams, as it's realistically been banned by C9 every single game until now, and Set as a whole is very powerful in jungle. It's a better pick for Blabber as it allows him to create plays instead of, say, the Lilia he's gone to, and it's very, very powerful in clearing early, and you get some big plays as well. TSM though go with the Senna and TF response, going back to their game 1 draft and how effective and useful that was, having the roam pressure from a TF and the scaling from the Senna and the heals as well, essentially makes it very powerful. Now C9 change up their draft slightly. Other than the Ezreal returning to the draft, the Bard is the new pick up here. This is a lot better of a pick in my opinion than what we saw before from C9, as Bard, obviously you can provide a bit of roaming and aggression across map, and more objective control with the Tempered Fate, and realistically outplay the roams that TSM want to go with, and actually play the map slightly better. That being said, it is still the return of Rakan, the pick that's basically won TSM a lot of the games that they've played so far, and Bio's having a phenomenal time on this pick, and it works very well in terms of how TSM want to play. Now, round 2 bans, we start with the Ori ban by TSM here. This kind of is interesting because Akali, which was played by C9 last game, it's kind of hard countered by Ori, and yes, I know that TSM have picked the TF, but in a sense, they're trying to goad C9 back onto this Akali pick with this Ori ban, and C9, they respond to not allowing TSM their game 1 draft by banning out the Graves and then banning out the Renekton. Obviously Renekton, big carry pick in the top lane that can do a lot of work, and it was a big pick for solo in their win against C9 if I remember correctly, whereas Broken Blade hasn't played this too often in the TSM squad. He's been going for more carry oriented champions like Aurelia's, like the Scions if he wanted that. He goes for them sort of pick. Now the last ban from TSM side's the Lee Sin. They're banning out the champ that they went for in game 2, the playmaking jungler, which obviously is something that Cloud9 go towards. And what's more interesting is TSM don't believe that Blabber's going to be playing the set, which is actually a good thing to note, because he may just let Licorice have the set in the top lane and be a lane bully, and so TSM probably are going to react with, because of the Renekton ban, by banning out a jungler instead. Now, looking forward to next round of picks, I'd expect TSM to go with a strong top lane pick that can essentially survive the harassment that this set wants to do, and realistically they could look towards their game 1 draft in terms of Lucian. And jungle picks wise for TSM, Speaker likes playmakers, get him on a playmaker. even a Sedge would work well with this squad because he can just lock up targets so that Bjergsen can get in behind and kill them with a gold card. That's the sort of champions you realistically want for TSM, so it's going to be interesting to see how they draft. Whereas Cloud9, they'll probably want a strong AP mid, which can react quite effectively to how TSM want to play, and probably go with whatever jungle / top laner they want to go with and play the game that way. So let us finish out the drafts. We start with the Evelynn pick for TSM. Not a pick I was expecting Speaker to be playing because this champion is very good at assassinating targets in the jungle. It was recently buffed and then nerfed on patch 10.17, but obviously we're playing on 10.16. It's still got a very large amount of strength, and as a whole it's easy to hit level 6 because of the respawn times on the jungle camps being so low now in season 10, and as a whole it gets the level 6 invis proc with ease. You can essentially become this big massive threat in the late game because of the amount of AP you build into your kit, and you're a very big monster as a pick. Now the next response from C9 is the rest of their squad, and I like this pick, the Silas. It's very strong into TSM squad. You look at what he can pick up. He has the Quickening from Rakan, the Dawning Shadow from Senna, so 2 big team fighting ults. TF's Destiny, essentially a free TP for himself that he can just steal once in a blue moon to get back to lane and use it that way. He's also got this Execute ult now from an Evelynn, and the last ult he gets, which we'll discuss in a minute, is a big one as well. And I like this pick a lot. It's got a high amount of AP scaling ratio and is a very strong champion. Now the last pick for the C9 side of things, it's kind of weird for me. It's the Rek'Sai, and it didn't make sense at first for me for why you pick it, but then you realise the Tremor Sense. The passive of Rek'Sai works incredibly well against Evelynn, and the reason being is whenever you're moving, you're detected if the Rek'Sai is buried in the ground, and essentially he can track targets, and in theory he can have his team, obviously as a communication with his team, they can tell him, hey, this is who's in front of us, who's off to the side is probably the Evelynn, and as such they're gonna know where Evelynn is while she's invisible. So this is a huge counter pick for C9 that obviously works well because Blabber can play this quite effectively. Now, the response from TSM is, knowing that the set is finally going into the top side, they can go with the pick that they went with in game 1, in the Lucian, and that Culling ultimate can just shred through a set who's haymakering. You essentially, when you're haymakering as a set, you essentially lock yourself in place. Lucian can just activate the Cull, land all the shots onto you, and you have a hard time running away from it then. And I love this pick a lot for TSM, and it's something that's very lane dominant that can essentially win this team fight in the top side and get an early advantage against the set. Nonetheless, I love the TSM draft. I love the response from C9, though I don't like the Ezreal. But yeah, Nautilus still open. Could have been a big counter into the Rakan, but hey ho. I can't comment too much about this. Let's get into the game where we're breaking down a team fight. Hey guys, welcome to, guess what? Another dragon fight. And once again, C9 make an execution error, giving over this game to TSM. So TSM approach from the lower river and Set and Bard engage, causing the first issue for C9. Set showstoppers the Rakan to not allow TSM to engage onto them, but the damage onto the Rakan gets nullified due to the Bard's tempered fate hitting him. C9 focus onto Evelynn, forcing her to defensive ult after Silas hijacks her ultimate, but then the C9 second blunder happens where Rek'Sai uses her execution ult onto the Evelynn to kill her, alongside the execution ult from the Silas. Now Silas gets the kill, and Rek'Sai cannot stop her ultimate, forcing her into a very bad situation as she goes headfirst into the TSM squad. He is forced into status, making it a momentary 4v4, to which Nisqy tries to engage onto TSM, but guess what? He's forced into status as well, just after the Rek'Sai gets out of his, keeping it a 4v4, but this time TSM have the health advantage. And from here on forward, once Silas comes out of his status, he is immediately snared by the Senna W and is killed. Set is also rooted by this as well, and TSM clean him up. With this, Bjergsen flashes forward with his gold card and locks up the Bard, and that allows Rakan to W him up into the air and kill him off, giving TSM the Ocean Soul and game number 3, giving them the 2-1 advantage in this series. Welcome to possibly the last game of this series. We see TSM on blue, C9 on red. Let's go through the bans. Kali, Olaf, TF, the returning bans from the last game for TSM, and Kate, Set and Italy, the returning bans for C9. No changes there to discuss. Nothing other than actually Set returning to the ban list by C9, and that is actually huge because they're now on the red side, and they change up that ban slot as a whole because of that. Anyway, we can move forward now onto our first round of picks here, and there's actually quite a lot to discuss here, as the first pickup for TSM is the Senna. It's their strongest pick so far in this series, and they've won every Senna game I do believe that they've had, and that is huge. The response though is C9 steal the Lucian, and they steal the Evelynn. This is big for them because these are the two picks that TSM have bullied them with. Lucian in that top lane matchup has been huge for TSM, as he got an early lead in the last game and actually carried it through to late game and bullied out C9. However, that being said, Evelynn was a pick that was also used by TSM, and it was used quite effectively, but it was kind of counteracted quite heavily by the picks that C9 drafted in the Rek'Sai and the Silas, because they basically got free ultimates out of it, and the Tremor Sense kind of nullified the invisibility that this Evelynn wanted. That being said, TSM's response is not to go with the Rek'Sai themselves, they instead go with the Skarner that was recently buffed, and he got a bit of buffing, as I say. It gives him more shielding and more damage, and what's more, it's going to be paired alongside the Rakan, so the combination of the Skarner ult into Rakan W and Charm is a big thing that can happen, and as a whole I like this setup for TSM. That being said, the last pick for Cloud9 kind of nullifies some of this, as the Tahm Kench comes through, the kind of Skarner tax reducer, in terms of the fact that you reduce the amount of QSSs you need, and as a whole is a very strong pick. I like it for Vulcan. They won their last game where they had this, I do believe. Did they have it in the last game? No, they didn't. So every game so far in the series that they've had the Tahm Kench, they've won. That being said, it's only one game. Nonetheless, let's take a look-see at the second round of bans. We see Syndra and LeBlanc banned out by Cloud9 here, targeting out Bjergsen's pool, as he hasn't picked up the TF in this game, and realistically it's banned. And as a whole, TSM respond by banning out the Shen, so no Stand United global ult domination alongside that Tahm Kench, and that hints to me that TSM know that Licorice is not going to be piloting the Lucian in top lane, considering the fact that Nisqy, I do believe, has played tons of Lucian mid in solo queue, and as such TSM have done their research and know that it's more than likely going in the mid wave. That being said, the other band coming out from TSM, I do actually like. It's Yawn. It removes the safety option at top lane. That being said, GP is still open for these two teams, and that is a very safe blind pickable top with a global ultimate that would work very nicely, in my opinion, with this Cloud9 squad, because of the fact that you can essentially use the Tom Kench semi-global with the GP global in tune to essentially execute fights and be very impactful in that sort of sense. And yeah, as we look at our last round of picks, the Ashe is finally going to be picked up for Sven here. He hasn't gone to this at all this series. He's gone for his Ezreal for safety and usage, and I like this switch up. It means that he's going for a bigger pick champion, and as a whole he can actually try and scale with the Senna and try and poke her down and pick her off with ease. Obviously with the Tom Kench on their side, they can essentially use her, transfer around the map to essentially chase down targets, as well as have the Evelynn coming from the side and execute them once she lands the pick with the Enchanted Crystal Arrow. Now the response from TSM is locking in the Broken Champs, Jace, for the topside matchup. Big pick here. There isn't too many blind pickable options into him, and he's very strong. He's a big lane bully because of the mixed damage that he can produce from melee and ranged. He also is very, very damage heavy, so he can probably burst out most top lanes that he goes against, like say a Sion, maybe even an Urgot if Licorice wants to go for that. And the last pick for TSM is a pick you do not give TSM. Bjergsen Zilean. I have nothing else to say than when you give this pick over to him, he will carry and he will use the Zilean ultimate to perfection. He is that good at this champion. It's a feared pick for most in the LCS because he can use it so well. And with this TSM squad, essentially they can send Skarner in with the Zilean ult, he can pull back someone, bring him into his team. If he dies, then oh well, he's brought someone at least farther back and he can basically respawn with this little ult. And you also have the fact that you want the Rakan going in as well with the quickness. You can put that on him. He's unkillable and he's charming up the enemy team. That is the strength of this Zilean in this team comp, and it works so well, especially with the Senna sustain. This team comp works very well for TSM. And the last pick for C9, not a big fan. Wukong. Yes, passive armor. Works well. And it's going into a Jace that builds full to AD, so having some armor is strong, but it's not got that good of an engage because of the fact that it will have to get through this TSM squad, and it's very easy for the Jace with his hammer to knock back targets. So once the Wukong tries to dive them, he just gets knocked back with the hammer, and essentially that second ultimate is where TSM kind of get the advantage because they can dogpile onto the Wukong before he gets that second part of his ult off, and thus basically outdrafting C9 here in game number 4. Anyway, I've ranted quite heavily about this draft. Let us jump into game for the last team fight to break down. Welcome to the unscripted portion of this video where I'm not using a script. Anyway, display is TSM attacking Cloud9, who are setting up for the Rift Herald that's just spawned, and what we see is Evelynn's revealed, going towards this actual Herald, and Skarner's there as well. Now, Rakan is hovering around, looking to engage, with Evelynn now sweeping, going into this control ward of TSM, taking the Skarner Scryer Bloom, and now TSM decide to attack, with the Broken Blade coming in from the one side, and the quickening from Rakan looking to lock up the Ashe and the TK. In doing so, that means that TSM can engage. Broken Blade gets caught off on one side, getting executed by the Wukong ult, while Ashe gets executed by the Zilean bombs. Then we see Skarner pulling in the Lucian into a double bomb, locking him up indefinitely, and TSM picking up a second kill in this fight. Then it's Evelynn getting chased down by TSM. She gets knocked up in the air by Rakan, and then immediately killed off by Senna. And TSM pick up 4 kills in this fight, and then they head straight down to the Mountain Drake and get this for free due to the fact there's no jungler on the C9 side, and in total actually winning this game as a whole. This is so much easier than actually writing a script. Why didn't I do this for every other play? Anyway, that's going to be it for this actual game. Let's go over the series overview right now, where I can actually discuss things as a whole. So, let's discuss the series as a whole, because there's a lot to actually discuss for the 4 games. Game 1, TSM threw everything out the window. They just played this bizarre team comp that was all ranged, and C9 had no response to it. And realistically, if TSM kept going through it, I'm pretty sure they wouldn't have actually been able to respond to it. But obviously, with the bans that came through in the second game and the side selection changes, it meant that TSM had to adapt. Game 2, TSM kind of got outplayed by C9. They were miscontrolled in certain aspects of the game, and realistically just were not playing the same sort of style that they played in Game 1, sorry. Game 3, we look at the styles. C9 in team fights misexecuted. They allowed TSM to scale up in Drakes, getting to Soul Point, and winning through Drakes and getting to Soul. Whereas TSM executed fights very nicely and played with actual good effort. Game 5 was just the tilter if you're C9. TSM came out swinging and came out swinging hard. And what amazed me through the entire series, Lucian was given over to Broken Blade twice. And in them 2 games that he was allowed to play it, TSM won. Sven played Ezreal for 2 games. He won one and lost the other. But even, actually, did he win one? I forget what he drafted in Game 2. If it was the Ezreal in Game 2, then no, it was the Senna. So, his Ezreal's not won a game, I do believe, in playoffs this split. And that is a huge thing to say, considering it's your comfort pick. You cannot win on it. And that means that everyone's beaten your best pick. That is not a good thing to say. And as a whole, when it came to Game 5, you could tell C9 were tilted. There was full tilt on them. They were not being good players. They kind of played very badly. And when Bjergsen, who has not been allowed in the Golden Guardian series, his Zillion, because it's so damn good, you know that when it's not banned out, he's going to go towards it. And when you're banning out Syndra and LeBlanc, yes, these are 2 of his big picks, but I'd rather see him on a Syndra because he hasn't played it too often this split, and it has taken losses in this year. Whereas his Zillion, he's pretty much undefeated this split on it. And when he gets it, he carries. So you cannot allow it to go through in pick and ban. So when it comes to this TL game, I think we're going to see TSM's big carries being banned out. Like that Lucian will not make it through. That Zillion more than likely will not make it through. Whereas TSM are probably going to go for this sort of comp that they went in Game 1. I watched the FlyQuest TL series as I started this video. TL were kind of trying to play a bit more experimental because they knew that they're already at Worlds. They can be more experimental, ready for Worlds, because the patch that the teams are playing on here in playoffs is the exact patch where Worlds is going to be played. I think it's going to be this or patch 1017, where obviously some of these picks that teams are pulling out aren't as good, whereas the picks that Team Liquid are trying to pull out now are probably slightly stronger. And that's where it interests me, because Team Liquid are this sort of squad that will do this sort of things right now to prepare, and I like doing that now, but it's the wrong time to do so, and TSM will probably come out swinging, and this series that's coming up with them versus Team Liquid, it's going to be an absolute banger in my opinion, and it's going to be interesting to see who goes into the planes and who goes straight into the Worlds groups. Anyway, that's going to be it for this video. If you enjoyed it, leave a like down below, subscribe if you're new if you want to, and I will see you guys later with the G2 and Fnatic series breakdown, which I'm yet to touch right now, and it's the 1st of September. So, peace out.